So some time ago, I coded this little digital sketch, which I call Film Extendo, which basically takes each frame of a video and places it on the canvas one at a time till you get this effect where it looks like there's a video block. And I quite liked that effect, and I recently got to thinking, what if I could 3D print that, and what would that look like? And so I got to think about what I could print, and the first thing I thought of was Edward Muybridge's Horse in Motion, which is known as the first video, made in 1878 as a series of high-speed images. And so the process I thought of was like, what if I take these frames, overlap them, and what if I can sort of visualize the motion through time as an object? And so here I'm thinking about, what does that animation look like as in 3D space? And so that's where we get to what I'm going to show today, which is how to basically turn a movie into a 3D object to print. And this is a render that I visualized to show what the final 3D print will look like. So let's get into it. The programs we'll be using today are Photoshop, Illustrator, and Blender. Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator both cost money, but there are free alternatives online, and of course Blender is free and open source. So first thing we want to do is open Photoshop and drag in our Muybridge file. So one thing I have to do is actually take out these frames from the still image, and I'm going to manually cut those out. But if you have a sequence of frames already, still open a Photoshop file, go to File, Scripts, load files into Stack. Let me bring that window over here, and browse for the folder with your image sequence in it and import that, and it'll import each frame as a layer. And that's what we want ultimately with this file as well. So what I'll do is select the marquee tool or press M. I have a fixed ratio of 3:2, and select the top left corner, drag, and making sure that this this layer is not locked. You can click the lock to unlock it. And with the shortcut Command-Shift-J, that creates a new layer from the selection. So now if I isolate that layer, you'll see I have that, and I'll just repeat this process over and over. So if I take out or turn off the visibility on the bottom layer, you'll see I'm left with these frames. And the next thing I'll do is just resize them so they're all the same size. So I'll take my grab tool or press V, select them, drag it to the top left corner, Command T to enter free transformation mode. Don't hold Shift and resize. Okay, so now I've successfully stacked all the layers till they're about the same size. Select all the layers, center them. And I'm actually going to crop my canvas to the size of these frames. Press Enter, and now I'm going to save this file wherever I want. I'll just do my desktop for now. Muybridge frame sequence, and save it as a large document format. That's fine. Click Save. Okay, so now we're done with Photoshop, and now we can actually jump into Illustrator. So let me minimize that. In Illustrator, I can actually open up the Photoshop document directly. So I'll open. There it is. So if I open that, and when you open up a Photoshop file, Illustrator will detect it as a Photoshop file and give you these options. So I want to convert layers to objects. Can we get a preview what that will look like? Click OK. If I go over to my Layers tab, you'll see that each frame that I cut out is now its own layer with the image nested in it, which is what we want. So the next thing we have to do is convert these bitmap pixel-based images into vectors. What I've done is I've actually created an action to automate this process. So if I go to Window, down to Actions, I'll have this Actions window pop up. And an action at a high level is basically just something that you can make as a user of Illustrator to automate some steps. And so what this action specifically does, and I'll make sure to add this action file in the description if I can, is it takes the image, traces it, makes and expands the image and then runs a simplify on the curve, just because I was noticing there's a lot of noise. And you'll see if I take this and select this first layer, and when I select this dot, there's a little color box that indicates I'm selecting this top visible layer, and I run my image action by pressing play, you'll see what happens is that it traces the objects, simplifies it, and then selects the next layer. And so what I could in theory keep on doing is keep pressing play until I make my way down all these layers. But what I want to do, I don't want to have to do that for every single frame, so I'm gonna back all the way up. So I wrote a short little script that runs this action for however many layers there are in this document. So the way you get to that is you go to File, Scripts, and I have this script called Apply Image Trace. So I have to make sure to select the top layer again, then go to Scripts, Apply Image Trace. And what this will do if we let it run, we can sort of see it working slowly, and the screen does go black a little bit. It won't crash the program, you just have to wait a second. And once it's done, you'll see that every image in this document has been made into a vector. I can toggle through and show each of those layers. So now we run into another problem, which is that Illustrator doesn't have a native way to export every layer as its own file, oddly enough, at least from what I could see. And so I went online and found another script which basically does exactly this. And so if we go to File, Scripts, Multi-Exporter, and this is an open source software. I'll link the GitHub in the description. If I click that, and then this window will pop up. Choose where you want these images to go. Desktop for me is fine. The export format, make sure it's SVG, and make sure we want the current artboard and all the layers is fine. So after that, just click export. Your program will stutter, but it won't crash, and just let it run its course. So once that's done, we can see the files on our desktop as SVGs. So the next step is to start bringing these SVGs into Blender. I'm going to close Illustrator and open Blender. Here I have an empty, I have a new file. And what I'm going to start doing is importing these SVGs by going to File, Import, SVG, selecting a file from the desktop where I exported it. Let's start with the first layer. And the first thing we have to do is start to basically extract this outline, and we want to ignore all these other vector shapes. And we'll do this to every single frame. And unfortunately, I don't have like an automated way to do this. This is sort of where it gets manual, but I'll walk through how to do one frame and then just apply them to the rest. So the first thing we want to do is select the main horse shape. And this process really only works with a continuous vector object. So eventually we'll have to take out these holes. I'll have to fix this horse's leg down here. But I'm going to click within this area, click G to start moving the object. I'm going to hit Z just to keep it along the Z axis. And with that separated, what I'll do now is just select the bottom section, hit X, and delete that. And now what I'm going to do, so this is considered a curve in Blender, and we want it to be a mesh because eventually we want to work with meshes. Go up to Object, go down to Convert to, select Mesh from Curve Metasurf Text. And it looks like nothing's happened, but if we, with this object still selected, hit Tab, which will switch us to edit mode. So if I hit Tab, I can toggle between edit and object mode. In edit mode, you'll see that Blender has done a job where it's tried to sort of estimate where points along the curve are to make this flat mesh. And obviously this is really quite messy. So the way we're going to clean this up is with a really quick trick. So while in edit mode, go over here, top left, click Edge Select. We can also press 2 on your keyboard. 1, 2, and 3 toggle between the vertex, edge, and face selection. So in 2, in edge selection mode, go to Select, Select All by Trait, Non-Manifold. And this will basically pick up every edge that is facing outwards and touching free space. What we'll do now is press Shift D to duplicate. And you'll see now if I move my cursor around, I have a duplicate of that mesh line. If I hit X, it'll snap to the X-axis. So GX to move it some more. And at this point, I'm going to hit 1 in the vertex mode, go up to Vertex, Smooth Vertices, and down here in bottom left, you might see this collapsed menu. If you open it up, you can play with the slider to smooth out some of the hard edges. 0.5 is fine for me. And this is just for my personal preference. I don't want to have really hard edges. We can actually get rid of this previous model. To do that, I'm just going to select it. Make sure I'm in wireframe mode. Hit X and just delete all the vertices here. So now if we press A, we select only the stuff we want. I'm gonna do one more transformation just to make my life easier down the road. Right click, click Merge Vertices by Distance. And if you don't see this, make sure you're in vertex selection mode. So right click, Merge by Distance. Again, menu bottom left. Do it 0.002 is fine. Yeah, that generally gets the number of vertices down. And what that's doing is just finding areas with high density. So if I undo, you'll see that there's these vertices right here. There's almost too many of them. So with the simplification, merging by distance, I just get fewer. So now I'm gonna start cleaning up this model. I'm gonna select these vertices, click X, destroy them, delete them. I don't know why I said destroy, X, and now there's a gap here. If I hold Shift, left click both of them, hit F, I will merge them. So from here, I'll just repeat that exact same process on all the rest of the 11 frames. And from there, we'll be able to move on and actually start making the mesh. Okay, so I finished tracing all those images and I've already begun stacking them here, which is how we want to start doing that. So with all the the horses outlined, we want to start stacking them, and the way to do that is select each one and move them into place. And a useful shortcut here, while holding Alt and the middle mouse button, drag down to get to an orthographic top view, and that'll let you align these images properly. You could be very, very meticulous and actually create these a register so each frame is perfectly aligned. Again, I'm not too concerned with accuracy. I just want to get the general motion. And as you can see here, from straight above, you can sort of get all the frames in one. So I'm going to adjust this a little bit and get the head in the right place. And for the next step, we actually have to make sure that I'm actually going to move this down a little bit. And I've just spaced these manually and nothing programmatic or equal between these. You'll notice that if I select this pillar, all the objects are highlighted. If I select this one, only that one's highlighted. That's because this object is not part of this object. To make them all the same object, which is what we'll need later, we have to select them both and then do the shortcut Command J. Manipulation we're about to put on to the mesh requires that they all be in the same object because we have to enter edit mode by pressing tab. And from here, we can actually start seeing some of the fruits of our labor. So while in edit mode, press A to select all your vertices and edges. Go up to this menu, Edge, Bridge Edge Loops. And what this will do is it'll loft between every layer in our movie. And you might run into some issues like this. If this ever happens, let me just Command Z. It's likely because there's some hanging loop, or this layer is not a continuous loop. And here I see that there's this hanging vertex. If I select it, click X, delete the vertex, do it over again, you'll see that basically fixed it. I'm gonna switch over to this face view and you'll see this is pretty much our shape and it looks relatively good. There's some issues here, but for the most part, this is, I think, as close as we're gonna get. So now you'll see we have this shape and I can actually see through it. It's kind of hollow. It's just exactly what we want. But the top and bottom are not closed. So to do that, it's actually a pretty easy fix. If we go up to select all bitrate, non-manifold, you'll see that it selects the vertices that are not closed off. And non-manifold objects we can't 3D print them, so to 3D print we have to make sure everything is closed off. So with these selected, I go up to, I believe it's, yeah, vertex, new edge, or just press F. It's really easy. And you see they're filled in properly. And so this is a pretty good model, but there's not a lot of detail in it. So if I go back a few steps, back to this step, edge, bridge edge loops, you'll see that there's a couple different options in the bottom left. If I add cuts in between each layer, I get a sort of a smoother path between the two. And you can change how it's interpolated. If you add the more cuts you add, the smoother it may become. And you can just play with these settings till you get something that you like. So I like this setting of just 2 edge loops and blending the surface together. It looks pretty good. And again, since I went back a few steps, I'll have to select the manifold edges again and close them. So at this point, you could 3D print this, and there's a 3D printing module in Blender which you can use to check how 3D printable this would be. And you'll see I did a pretty good job. There's still some things I need to fix. You get this by pressing N to get your information bar, and to install this plugin, you go to your edit, preferences, let me open this, add-ons, and search for 3D print, 3D print toolbox, and just check it to install it. I won't go over how to use this 3D printing tool because honestly I don't know exactly how to use it. The main thing I look out for are the non-manifold edges and any intersecting faces, which might interfere and make a weird print. If you click any of these issues that it finds, it'll highlight the problem faces or vertices or edges. And if you ever have a non-manifold object, you can click Make Manifold, and that could fix some things. Another quick fix is to select your mesh, go to face, or let's see, mesh cleanup. You can fill the holes, so if there's like a gap in the mesh, it'll just basically fill it with a face, and it might do a weird job of it. And you can also delete any geometry that might be floating and not connected to anything, which would interfere with the print as well. A few other things that we can do, I think the one I like to do is add a smooth modifier. So with the object selected in object mode or edit mode either, go on the right side, there's a wrench icon. Click that tab to go to the modifiers, and this is where we'll apply some transformations to the mesh. I like to use the one called smooth. Oh, I misclicked. The one called smooth. And this does a simple smoothing job, and you can just balance it just how you like. I think where it was fine. I had a few repetitions to make it a little more smooth. I also like to ignore the Z-axis because I like the top and bottom to be perfectly flat. So I have the smooth and ignore the Z-axis. And once it's where I like it to be, I click this little drop down arrow and click apply, and that applies the effect to the mesh. So I'm almost ready to export. The last thing I'll do is just make sure it's aligned at the bottom. Click G, Z, hold down Control, and that'll snap to the plane. GX, hold Control to snap it. We go in orthographic view, make sure it's all how I like. Great. And now I'll go over to this 3D printing tab, select where I want to have it saved. I'll select my desktop. and then just export it. Let me open up my Explorer, and here's the STL file. If I right click it, open with 3D Viewer, I can get a general preview of it, and it looks pretty good. So now the last step is to bring it into our slicer software. I use this application called Prusa Slicer. This is slicer software designed for the Prusa brand of 3D printers. Let's go and import that STL and choose the file that we just exported on our desktop. First thing I'm going to do is scale up 300%, maybe 400. There we go, looks pretty good. And there are a lot of different options. I'm going to change the infill to like 5% because I don't need this to be a very strong 3D print. And in general, I just leave it as default values. I typically don't really venture far from this simple tab. You can go into the advanced tab and get advanced settings for your 3D printer. I just keep it basic. So I'm happy with the size. It looks pretty good, right? I can start slicing it, and what this will do, if I click slice now, it'll start looking at the file and dividing it into slices along the z-axis. So let's get a little animation so it's done. If I grab this arrow at the top, I can start to see how it divided all the layers, and I actually get a cool animation here where you can sort of see the horse's legs running in space as if the movie was playing. So that looks pretty good. So at this point, I would just export the G code, and the G code is just the file type that you need to 3D print. And I would put that G code onto a USB drive, plug it in the printer, and start printing. And that's basically how to 3D print a movie from a series of images. Thanks a lot.